Can you give us some context for how significant the last 10 to 11 days have been in the broader stretch of this conflict? It feels like a momentum shift, but I can't tell if that's just the media making headlines or if it's an actual tactical shift in the momentum of this conflict.
Well, the last time Russia was invaded and had its own territory occupied was in World War II. So this is a major historical shift in that sense, because Russia has been an aggressor, obviously, since 2014 at least. But this is the first time that they're facing a battle on their own territory. And that's, Putin makes a big deal out of World War II. And you would think he would have learned the lessons of World War II, which is not to get involved in another land war in Europe because of the unpredictable nature of what happens there. And so, ironically, much of his ideology, much of his stature inside of Russia comes from the great Russian victory in World War II, the Soviet victory. And now that's completely undermined. People are, referring back to the Kursk tank war that was so vital to that earlier conflict, and now it's going the other way for Russia. So obviously, Ukraine is not like Hitler or Napoleon. It's not pushing toward Moscow, but it is inflicting significant damage on the Russian psyche, on the Russian image abroad, and that sort of thing.
Let's talk more about the Russian psyche and Putin's reaction. What do we know about how he's thinking at this point in time and how he might respond to the Ukrainian incursion?
Mm-hmm. Well, Putin is always focused on one thing, which is maintaining his own political power. He can never leave office because his whole system is corrupt, and if somebody were to replace him, they would most likely kill him. So it's do or die for Putin. And so he's just trying to figure out, given this corrupt system that he's working in and very inefficient, and where nobody among the military, the intelligence groups, they don't trust each other. He has his own personal guards as well. So there's lots of different units, and he's trying to make that whole system work at a time when, everyone is afraid to do anything they feel like is not going to be what the leader wants them to do. So nobody's going to take initiative. So he needs to pull together the resources he has, try and coordinate them, and fight back against this Ukrainian initiative. And so that's going to be very difficult for him to do.
Interesting. So as we look at his options and we consider a potential end to the conflict, obviously no one knows when it would end. But if you think about what you just said about his political future, are there terms of a ceasefire that you could see Putin agreeing to?
Only under complete duress. I think the best model to think of Russia right now is Venezuela, where you have a leader, who's going to stay in power no matter what, and regardless of what happens to his country. So, like Venezuela lost 25% of its population, the economy's in tatters, but the leader hangs on no matter what. And so I think that's the good model for what Putin's going to do. He's going to hang on to power no matter what. And so I don't think he wants to negotiate. It does sound like they want to swap the prisoners at this point, because the Ukrainians apparently have captured, more than 100 Russian soldiers. These are probably young conscripts, and it would be extremely unpopular in Russia if these people remained as prisoners of war. So I think Putin, at a minimum, is going to try and keep down public unhappiness about this fighting. But on the other hand, there's very little sign that the Russians are actively opposing the war, or that they're actively opposing, the Putin administration, even despite these obvious gaffes in the war fighting strategy. So Putin doesn't seem to be under any public pressure, but I think he would like to make sure that that pressure stays minimal. And so that would be a prisoner exchange I could see, but probably not a negotiation.
Interesting. So even this Ukrainian incursion is not creating public pressure among Russians to end this.
It doesn't seem to be. I mean, since Putin controls the media and the way it's presented, it doesn't seem to be causing a lot of interest among Russians, and either to join the army, defend the country, or to criticize the government for this failure. You could imagine if the Russians invaded Florida, for example, the rest of the United States would pull together and help our colleagues in Florida. But that's not what's happening in Kursk. So, it's kind of hard to see what's going on there. I think everyone in Russia is so demobilized and depoliticized, and they're just focused on their own problems with the shrinking economy, that that they don't really want to get mixed up in all this stuff.